You check your phone. No notifications. No missed calls. No one asking where you've been. You scroll. You see laughter. Glasses clinking. Smiles wide enough to sell happiness. And for a second, just a second, you wonder, is something wrong with me? Because society has a script. If you are alone, you must be broken. If your circle is small, you must be unlikable. If you walk alone, you must have failed the test of being human. But what if that silence in your life isn't rejection? What if it's filtration? What if your solitude isn't evidence of weakness, but evidence of incompatibility? Tonight, we are going to dismantle the lie. Because some people are not lonely, they are selective, and there is a psychological reason why the rarest minds almost always walk alone. If you recognize yourself in what I'm about to say, don't flinch. Let's begin with something uncomfortable. Most people do not want truth. They want harmony, and harmony requires agreement, not accuracy. If you have few friends, it may not be because you failed socially. It may be because your nervous system refuses to participate in collective illusion. There are people who hear words, and there are people who analyze inconsistencies. When someone says, "I'm happy for you," most people hear support. You hear micro-hesitation. You hear the fractional delay before the smile. You notice the eyes didn't align with the tone. This is not paranoia. In psychology, this is related to rapid thin-slice cognition, the ability to detect patterns in minimal data. Most social bonds are built on selective blindness. You are not blind, and that makes bonding difficult, because connection often requires overlooking what you see. You struggle to pretend, and people sense it. You become intense, hard to read, too serious. Translation: you see too much, and people are uncomfortable being fully seen. Small talk is not neutral to you. It drains you. Weather, gossip, complaints, recycled emotional scripts. For many, this is lubrication. It keeps social gears moving. For you, it feels like intellectual suffocation. There's a personality dimension called need for cognition. People high in it physically prefer depth. They seek complexity. They metabolize ideas the way others metabolize entertainment. You don't dislike people. You dislike entropy. You want 3 a.m. conversations about destiny, death, power, and consciousness. But most rooms are not built for that frequency, so you go silent. And silence is misinterpreted as arrogance. Most friend groups are informal hierarchies, unwritten rules, shared enemies, shared beliefs, shared emotional rhythms. The moment you question those rhythms, tension forms. You don't automatically align. You ask why, and why destabilizes fragile systems. People who rely on group approval feel threatened by autonomy. You cannot be socially leveraged. You cannot be guilted into agreement. So you become the outlier, and groups protect themselves from outliers. Exile is often a defense mechanism, not punishment. Some people socialize to pass time. You feel time like a countdown. You are constructing something, a body, a mind, a business, a philosophy, a future. Every hour spent in idle repetition feels like theft. So you begin saying no, no to drinks, no to drama, no to distraction. Eventually, the invitations stop, and you mistake filtration for abandonment, but you made a trade. You chose focus over familiarity. History shows a pattern. Deep builders experience social thinning because sustained focus and constant availability are neurologically incompatible. You cannot remain in flow and remain in constant social maintenance. So your circle contracts, not because you're antisocial, because you are directional. This one is darker. Some individuals unconsciously trigger insecurity in others, not through aggression, through composure. When you do not compete for attention, when you do not chase validation, when you are comfortable in silence, you become a mirror. And insecure people hate mirrors, because mirrors reveal, If someone is dependent on approval, your independence feels like judgment. If someone is performative, your authenticity feels like exposure. Projection begins. You are labeled cold, arrogant, detached, but what you actually are is non-participatory and delusion, and that threatens fragile egos. Most people are present-driven, impulse-driven, emotion-driven. You simulate outcomes. You think 5, 10, 20 years ahead. You see habits turning into destinies. You see choices compounding. When someone says, "Let's not think about tomorrow," your mind refuses. Because tomorrow is the architecture of today. This temporal gap isolates you. It's difficult to deeply bond with someone who lives emotionally in the present when you live strategically in the future. Different clocks, different priorities, different fears. Most humans are externally regulated. They need applause, witness, validation. You are internally regulated. You read without telling anyone. You train without posting. You create without announcement. Your motivation does not require audience. This makes you hard to manipulate and difficult to socially pressure. People subconsciously sense this. They cannot bribe you with inclusion. They cannot punish you with exclusion. So they disengage, because power works best on the dependent. And you are not dependent. But now comes the dangerous part. When solitude stretches too long, the mind begins asking, "Am I just coping?" And this is where self-doubt begins to erode clarity. Not all solitude is strength, and not all isolation is strategic. Some of it is defense, some of it is avoidance. And if you misinterpret which is which, you don't become sovereign, you become rigid. Let's dissect that next. Let's destabilize your ego for a moment. Yes, some solitude is filtration, but some solitude is fear disguised as superiority. And if you don't examine that carefully, you become trapped inside your own mythology. When you repeatedly experience misalignment, your brain begins constructing a narrative. I'm just different. I'm ahead. They don't get me. Sometimes this is true. Sometimes it's armor. If you assume everyone else is shallow, you stop practicing social calibration. You stop refining articulation. You stop translating your depth into digestible language, and isolation hardens into identity. That is dangerous, because identity is sticky. The longer you tell yourself you are the lone wolf, the harder it becomes to recognize allies when they appear. There is another uncomfortable truth. Extreme self-reliance is sometimes born from disappointment, from betrayal, from inconsistent attachment. When connection failed repeatedly, your brain may have adapted. Depend on no one. That adaptation protects you, but it also restricts intimacy. The line between sovereignty and avoidance is thin. Ask yourself honestly, are you alone because others can't match you, or because you stopped allowing people close enough to try? Self-awareness requires brutal honesty. You crave depth, but depth requires articulation. Many highly introspective individuals struggle not because others are incapable, but because they struggle to communicate their internal world. You assume people won't understand, so you don't attempt clarity. You withdraw prematurely, and missed alignment feels like proof of incompatibility. But sometimes it was simply underdeveloped communication. Growth requires responsibility, not superiority. Here is the truth. You do not need to become average to survive socially, but you do need range. Social intelligence is not conformity, it's translation. You can hold deep philosophy and still ask someone about their day. You can build empires and still understand emotional nuance. Silence is powerful, but connection requires expression. Learn the difference. Your task is not to find people. Your task is to become signal clear. Clarity attracts resonance. Ambiguity repels it. Build visibly. Speak precisely. Develop skill so undeniable that it creates gravitational pull. Rare minds recognize rare signals. but signals must be emitted, not hidden. If this is resonating, don't just nod and scroll. Subscribe, because this channel isn't therapy. It's psychological calibration. And if you want to build a mind that cannot be socially manipulated, emotionally derailed, or intellectually diluted, this is your arena. Comment one word below, sovereign, if you choose growth over comfort, because the next layer goes darker. And it's not for everyone. Here's what nobody tells you. Once you accept your autonomy, you become visible, and visibility invites resistance. The higher you rise intellectually, physically, financially, spiritually, the more friction you encounter. Why? Because hierarchy is psychological. When someone improves rapidly, it forces others to evaluate themselves. And most people avoid self-evaluation, so they criticize, minimize, mock. Projection intensifies as you grow. When you were quiet and uncertain, you were ignored. When you become decisive and directional, you are watched. Growth creates polarization. Some will be drawn to you. Others will be threatened. This is normal. Do not interpret resistance as evidence of error. Often it is evidence of movement. Solitude is not the goal. Power without connection is sterile. Connection without autonomy is slavery. Your task is integration. Depth plus warmth. Vision plus empathy. Strength plus calibration. Become formidable, not isolated. Become sovereign, not rigid. Look at your life right now. The empty chair across from you, it isn't empty. It's unfilled, reserved for alignment. Do not lower standards to fill it, but do not build walls so high no one can enter. There is a difference between discernment and defense. Learn it, master it, and walk forward, not as a loner, but as a calibrated force. You were never broken. You were unfinished. Now finish the build.